All right, y'all. On today, I am so excited to say that joining me is Mr. Johnathan Lee Iverson. And just to give you a little background on him, the Ringmaster and Chairman of the Board of Omnium, a brand new circus, is an accomplished and history-making showman who has been privileged to grace the most coveted stages and arenas the world over. As a member of the Boys Choir of Harlem, he shared the spotlight with the likes of LL Cool J, Spike Lee, Lena Horne, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Luciano Pavarotti, Roberta Flack, my favorite, Placido Domingo, Tony Bennett, and scores of other luminaries in the world of entertainment. He's kept company with statesmen such as the late South African President Nelson Mandela, Secretary of State General Colin Powell, and 4 U.S. presidents, including Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and William Jefferson Clinton. The youngest and first Black Ringmaster of the iconic Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, which he served until its closing in 2017, making him the last ringmaster in the 146-year history of the greatest show on earth, is renowned for his powerful voice and superstar presence, as well as being deemed one of Barbara Walters' 10 most fascinating people. But he is most proud of appearing as a question on Jeopardy twice. And he is currently now the Ringmaster of Circus Vargas. Y'all, welcome, Johnathan Lee Iverson. Hello.
I like that. I love it. Thank you so much. It's so kind of you.
Oh, you're so very welcome. So very welcome. Thank you for joining me today. And so my first question to you, which I love to ask everybody, if I texted you and said, Johnathan, how are you doing? How was your day? What's going on? But you could only reply in emojis only, what would you text me?
I likely text you like the blush, the blush emoji. It's funny. The older I get, I'm becoming more like my father. He had this line every time I would ask him, how you doing? I'm alive.
Oh,
I'm alive. And it's fun. It came out. It just keeps coming. And my kids pointed out to me. They were like, you always say that's it. And when they get into stuff, I'm like, you'll live. It's just like, I'm like, man, I'm like becoming him. So that's just me, I'm learning to take everything day by day. I don't really have anything to really be down about, even when things get, when circumstances aren't ideal. I just really, I have a habit now, and really thanks to my wife, because she's done a lot of work in her own self, where she's now, transferring it back to me, and I'm very impressed by it. But she, she's like, you look, just remember all of the other things we have monumental things to be grateful for that really outweigh the inconvenience. We make big old shadows out of the inconveniences, and I think that throws us off and it gets us distracted. And I think that's why we have to pray without ceasing and be grateful. And stop murmuring all the time. And I'm coming out of that, and I'm like, you know what? I need to really just remember. I have a lot of things going for me. And, the beauty about being in circus is I'm around extraordinary people all the time. Whether it's Circus Vargas or whether it's on Omnium. Omnium has this incredible world where it's introducing audiences also to artists of multi-abilities. So I have a hard time using disable when you're talking about people who have been able to really transform their lives despite what seems like a disability, becoming almost superhuman. And so when you see people like that, who literally could, whether they were born that way or whether they just, through by way of an accident or what have you, turn around and make something of themselves that is extraordinary. And that would be difficult even for a fully functioning, so to speak, human being to do. You kind of go, you know what? Shut up, man. I'm fully limbed.
Right. Right.
I have my health. I'm in my right mind most of the time. I mean, just get out there and work with what's there.
Yes.
Life is seasonal, and that's what I remember. Life it comes in
Mm.
seasons, and you just have
Speak
to.
on it.
Yeah, you just have to work through the seasons. I think Tom Hanks had a wonderful. It kind of went viral. He's at a
Uh-huh.
round table with like the great Robert De Niro and some other actors, and
I
he said,
saw that.
yeah. And he goes, I wish somebody would have told me this too shall pass. I'm like, yeah, it's true.
Yes.
You got it going on. This too shall pass.
Yes. Right. It's good. This too shall pass. It's bad. This too shall pass. Like it just keeps going.
Yeah.
hmm Yes, that reminds me. I saw something. I think it was Instagram. I don't know, but I know it was a podcast, and it was like this young man was asking about, okay, like why, Lord, do I have to have these ups and downs? Like why? Oh, that's what it was. He was speaking to his therapist about like, I'm just asking like why does everything have to be up and down? Like I'm praying and da and she was like, think about this. If you always got what you wanted and everything was easy, you would flatline. But up and down is a heartbeat. Like, think about your heartbeat. It has peaks and valleys, and
Oh,
but it
yes.
keeps going. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Oh, that was beautiful. No, I saw that too. I believe his name is Pope. I know his last name is Pope. He's from
Okay.
Orlando. He's extraordinary. Such a wonderful artist because he's in like everything. Like he's been in everything. He's amazing. I loved what he had to say because it's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of forget. I look at it from as much as I can in my finite mind. Sometimes I think becoming a parent has given me a better perspective, and actually being married has given me a real this merciful kind of view of how God sees us and how he tarries with us. And
Yes.
it's like it's really humbling because you go, wow. So you would think like this grand creator, if you're thinking as a creator, well, when you create things, you want some kind of production out of it.
Yeah.
And it will take some breaking and it will take some remolding and shaping. And really, the clay can't say to the potter, why did you make me this way? I think it's so hard for us to accept that, we're not here for ourselves. I mean, we're in the larger scheme of things, we're here for a greater glory. So it's like, I think first accepting that and that you're not your own God. You don't get, and besides, whatever little story you have for yourself pales in comparison anyway.
Listen. Okay, thus the pivots. Thus you're like, wait, I'm supposed to be doing that? I never even thought about that.
Right.
And you're like, thank you, because your thoughts are better than mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I understand that. So with that takes me to how you got to where you got, because from the information you told me, you went from the boys choir and we're going to pursue opera, but you ended up in the circus. So
Absolutely.
let's dive into that. How did you get to where you are now?
It was the Christmas of 1987, and my mother, who is, I think, the greatest mind scientist walking, she somehow coached me into venturing into the Boys Choir of Harlem.
Okay.
And I always had a desire to travel the world. My home life was great. I grew up in New York City. My parents weren't married, but my father wasn't absent. As we're finding out now with the new data, like a lot of these fathers are actually very involved. My father was more of a cameo, but he was around. But my mother, she did most of the caring for me, but she was like, we were sweeping. I'll never forget it. We were sweeping. It was around the Christmas season. And I think I had just watched a special on the Boys Choir of Harlem.
Okay.
And she said, you want to try out for that. I didn't know then that she was just trying to find a way where she didn't have to pay for private school. So she wanted to put me somewhere where I would get some kind of good social development.
Right.
And, I had a god brother who was already in the boys choir. So she'd been trying to get information from my godmother about that. That wasn't going anywhere. So we just went for the audition.
Yeah.
I didn't really appreciate it, but singing is kind of like a thing in my genetic disposition, like on my mother's side, like everybody can sing. My cousins can blow, and they don't do it for real, but they just can do it. And everybody sings. My kids, they sing in the show. They're always singing. So singing is a part of our, I didn't really realize it. It was just something I did. And so I said, yeah, sure, let's try it. I got in. I auditioned. I thought, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing ever. Where's my plane ticket? I didn't, nobody told me this was a world-class musical institution. And despite the fact that these kids looked like me and were knuckleheads like me, they were serious workers, and they were manned by a real genius of a man, Dr. Walter J. Turnbull, who was a glorious musician, singer in his own right, who began this choir in the basement of Ephesus Church in Harlem. And it grew into a world-renowned institution. And he was a very hard man. He was exactly what I needed. He was exactly what a lot of us needed. And it's something I always explain, especially to my wife, when it comes to the rearing of boys. It's so different. And we kind of need this. It's you have to really have an interesting balance with men, because we're as coarse as we can be, we're actually rather fragile. And so you have to really know how to work that delicate balance. And he was brilliant at that for the most part, using music. And I mean, he was tough. I mean, he would go to jail a day. But there wasn't a kid I knew.
For what he did back then, yeah,
there wasn't a kid I knew who wouldn't take a bat to you if you tried something with him. We understood it. It was like, it's the language among lions. We understood it. And he set this bar, and it was very inspiring. He used to say to us all the time, only the pure in tone will survive. And he would say, only the pure in tone will survive. And he was like, he said, if you can survive, he said, I know I'm hard on you. He said, but if you can survive me, no one will intimidate you. You can survive anything. And he was right. And so during the course of being in the Boys Choir of Harlem, going through what it took to actually make it to the performing choir level, which was hard for me. I was 11 years old. Of course, it was 18 months before I really started performing. Of course, that was like an eternity. But I was so glad I learned that lesson, because I wanted to quit every other day. My mother was like, nope, you're going to finish what you started. And I finally did. And it was like the floodgates open. I could not perform. And this whole beautiful world opened to me. And that's where we were in Japan, my first trip outside the country. And we were on the same bill as the great Placido Domingo.
Yes.
And I didn't know him from a ham sandwich, but there was an older gentleman in the choir who came. He said, listen, I want you to hear what a real tenor sounds like. And he came and got me, and they introduced him on stage for his time on stage. And I swear to you, till this day, I've never had this happen to me. If I wanted to move, I couldn't. Everything blacked out. It was just him and me. And I mean, my entire system, I felt that. I feel it now talking about it. My entire system lit up. And I was like, that's it. That's me. That's what I'm that's who I am. I was like, I had no idea the human voice could do that. And I fell in love with this dude. I'm 13 years old. I'm this black kid from Harlem, New York, and I'm all in the opera. I didn't care. And the beauty of it was I had a lot of support. Even with my friends, my peers were very protective of me in that respect. It was so interesting, I mean, because everybody's in sports and rowdy, but, it was like, nah, he can, man, you really have, they're like, wow, you really actually have something there. And my teachers were very encouraging. So that's where the desire came from. And I really was falling in love with this music, or maybe it was just, man, I just couldn't believe how glorious the sound was. And back then we had cassette tapes, so I know what cassette tapes are. I had cassette tapes too. I wore those cassette tapes out, man, of Placido
Uh-huh.
Domingo, and
Ah,
so the focus was that I went to LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, and I
okay.
had my teen years were like awesome. I had this beautiful double life. I was going to school
Mhm.
and I was touring, and the
Yeah,
high school I went to was perfectly set up for that. They
right.
had a whole bunch of kids who were like that too. Some were doing soap operas, some were on Broadway, so it was like
Mm.
you had this work study thing going. We would have
Yeah.
Grammy Day at the schools where like Grammy nominated, Grammy award winning artists would come to our school. I saw the great
Mhm.
Henry Mancini once. He came in and he was conducting like this high school all-star band. The
Mhm.
doggone auditorium exploded because we didn't know how much of his music was in our consciousness. And he had a great time.
Ah.
I heard Aaron Neville, the great Aaron Neville. He came to our
Mm.
school and he sang the most beautiful rendition of Ave Maria I've ever heard.
Mhm.
And sang with the great Pete Seeger. And they would have like little workshops too. They call it Grammy Day at the school. So they would have
Yeah.
workshops with industry insiders, and they would actually teach us about different pathways of success that weren't necessarily on the stage, the behind the
Mhm.
stage studio work, stuff like that. So it was really
Okay.
engaging. My teachers
Yeah.
were very cool, man. My teachers were very cool.
Yes.
I charmed my way out of high school because my grades were really mediocre. And even my principal, man, God rest his soul, he was so funny. He was like, he said, "Look, I get it." He said, "And look, we're looking at your grades. They go up every year. We know you can do the work, but
Uh-huh.
you can't. Like you're on that path where you know what you're going to be, and we
Mhm.
we have no doubt you're going to make us proud or whatever." So, they were like, "Look, but you got to pass this, and then we could get you through." And I was
Right.
pull it off.
Great.
They were great. And then I went on to the Hart School of Music at the
Okay.
University of Hartford in
Okay.
Connecticut, where I met the beautiful Jerome Pruitt, who was a
Mhm.
fabulous tenor
Okay.
in Europe for years. And I went specifically to study with him.
Mhm.
And I learned so much from him. He was he really taught me the attitude of a singer. He really got me in really great shape. And I already had a wonderful foundation with the Boys Choir of Harlem. I was a
Mhm.
very fortunate vocalist because I got something a lot of vocalists don't get. And that's really good old school training with
Mhm.
teachers who protected me. Like Dr. Turnbull, even when I got to high school, he made me bring my rep to him.
Oh, wow.
He was like, "You're not gonna, I don't want them having you just singing." He said, "Yeah, you're gifted,
Okay.
but you're not gonna get blown out." So there were because
All right.
I remember I brought him this aria
Uh-huh.
and he flipped out, man. He almost nearly cursed me out. He's like, listen, he said, "I don't sing that." He said, "I'm grown." He said, "I don't
Right.
sing." He said, "Who are these people having you say?" And it was so endearing, even though he was
Mhm.
upset. I was like, man, he was really like almost overprotective. And he would
Yeah.
tell us all the time. He said one of the things he hated was the industry kind of exhausts a lot of young up and you see it all the time
Uh-huh.
who
Yes.
promising voices and they don't know any better and they get
Nope.
these people who are supposed to be coaches and managers or whatever and all they're doing is
Mhm.
just they're vampires and
Yeah.
so singing is such a sacred thing and it's so individual. I
Mhm.
mean, every voice isn't the same.
Mhm.
One of my uh, dearest teachers, he used to say to me all the time, he said, if you ever go in a studio and you're being taught the same way as everybody else, walk out. He said, your
Yeah.
voice is as distinct as your fingerprint.
Yep.
And I watched him do this too. It was wild because he was training me and another tenor, and he said, "Look, I watched him do. He was, I'm not teaching you all. You're built different. Your
Mm.
experiences are different. We were
Yeah.
different." He's like, all that stuff accounts for what your voice does. Yours
Yeah.
is mine was actually lighter than another gentleman I was working with. He was more of a
Mhm.
dramatic sounding tenor. I was on the verge of like lyric or something
Yes.
of that nature. So I was like, man, I got a lot of that stuff. And, my teacher's very instrumental. I had a wonderful teacher, Dr. Sherry Overholt, who would
Mhm.
actually substitute for Jerry Pruitt when he would go, he still had contracts, which I was impressed with because all of my teachers were actual accomplished working singers on a high level who happened to know how to teach really well. And so he would bring her in, and she was an excellent teacher and a singer herself. So it was one of these things where I felt like, man, I'm destined. This is it. I'm being, I'm groomed. It's the closest thing to, like, you read like Whitney Houston's biography, like her cousin is Dionne Warwick and her godmother is Aretha Franklin, and I think her distant cousin was Leontine Price. I'm like, come on, like, of course she's.
You couldn't have written any more perfect than that. Like, you're set,
right?
But you were too. Your tribe like came to you. It came to you.
It really did, and I thought, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah,
and I mean, I had this encounter with a fabulous conductor by the name of Willie Waters, and he cast me in. I was in college. It was Porgy and Bess, and it was a professional production of the Grand Connecticut Grand Opera. And so you can say that was my operatic debut, but it was a tiny role. But he gave it to me. I was 22, and I was still in that protective stage.
Yes, and
he was so kind to give that to me, and he called me in his dressing room, and this was like really like maybe a month or two before I graduated. And he said, listen, I'm gonna tell you. He said, you've got it. He said, you've got the stuff. You have $1 million voice. He told me that. He said, but I'm gonna tell you, this is a lonely life opera. And that kind of stuck with me because I was like, man, yeah, I know it is. And even now, I have a lot of friends in that industry, and I see it. Like, I don't. That was something I had to grapple with, and I thought about it. And then all of a sudden, here it is. I graduate. Yeah. And maybe 5 months later, my plan was to go to Europe. To study. It was all set up. I was supposed to go with this teacher. We were going to stay in Europe and develop there. Because I didn't really want to go to grad school. I was talking to somebody at a Texas university that was supposed to be really good. But I was like, I need to just, and they were like, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll study, get small roles, really just work but build. You have to grow. Yeah. Which I was fine with, but I had to get some funds. So I'm auditioning for a dinner theater somewhere. And in the audition, the director, Phil McKinley, was also, unbeknownst to me, directing. He was director for Ringling Bros and Barnum Bailey.
Okay.
So I get this strange call later that evening after the audition. They're like, oh, no, we want you for the dinner theater. This would be great. It was for a Christmas show, Fireside Dinner Theater. Out in Fort Atkins, Wisconsin.
Fireside. Oh my goodness, that's still around. Just let you know.
Quaint people, very nice, man. And Mayberry, for real. And they said, but would you be interested in audition for Ringmaster, Ringling Bros? And I was kind of like, what?
What? Huh? What?
I said, well, I guess.
I guess so. Why not? Yes, why not?
It was so wild. So I went and auditioned. I was up against about 30 other people. Okay. And so I think the first, I sort of auditioned already because but then they said, listen, we want to record you for the producer, Kenneth Feld of Feld Entertainment. Okay. And I said, okay, cool. They had me go in and do the classic, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. And I sang a song. And I could feel during that little audition that it was mine. Because the way the director, because Phil McKinley is brilliantly crazy. And he kind of was giving me this energy like, we're going to hire you. But he couldn't say it. So I went on I was doing the dinner theater, which was in a round. And when we got there, like midway through, he's like, okay, so Tim Holst was the legendary basic talent scout of Ringling Bros. The guy scoured the earth like 4 times a year looking for talent. He had the most exotic job ever. Right. And he said, Tim is coming and he's going to, they want a personal audition with you. And I kind of felt, okay, I think this is really happening. And it did. I auditioned for him and we sat down, made a deal, and history was there. And,
Yeah.
Phil looks at me and was like, that's why we wanted you in the round here. I wanted you to get used to being in a round because you're going to be in center ring. And I thought, oh, okay. So
Okay.
it was this beautiful detour. Like,
Yeah.
and in my mind, I still it didn't settle in yet.
Okay.
In my mind, I knew I had to take it because it was history. I was going
Mhm.
to be the first Black American to do it. I was
Mhm.
also told I was going to be the first New Yorker and the youngest to ever
Uh-huh.
do it. So you can't say no to history.
Right.
And I was thinking, oh, this will look great on the resume. This will be great. I'll have some great stories. Tell the
Right.
guys about those acrobats I met, whatever. And I thought I'd do it for like a year, 2 years, and that'll
Yeah.
be it. And I'll have enough money to do what I have to do in Europe.
Yeah.
But it turned into an 18-year odyssey, and it
Mm.
continues now. You know,
Yeah.
and it really turned into this thing where it was really conducive to who I am.
Ooh.
It really was, and everything I learned from my vocal training to
Mhm.
performance conduct in the Boys Choir of Harlem, because the Boys Choir of Harlem wasn't just about teaching you music. They
Mhm.
really taught you how to be a model citizen.
Right.
I mean, everything was a lesson. I mean, we had to set up our own stage. So you imagine these 10, 11, 12-year-old boys having to carry risers, flights of stairs. I knew kids who could work lights and sound and put that.
Wow.
And they did that because, according to Dr. Thurman, he said, I don't want you all to be snobbish jerks thinking you're above the workers, the crew. I
That's
want you
it.
to understand that it's a community, and
Mhm.
you're a part of that community. You may be the icing on top, but there's a
Mhm.
lot that
Mhm.
goes into this cake.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was the same way when we went to hotels. He threatened us for real. He said, "If you all go in here and act like banshees, you're not going to make it home." He said, "Just because they have maids and things like that," he's like, "doesn't mean you have to leave your rooms looking disheveled." And his
Uh-huh.
big thing for us was ambassadorship.
Yeah.
That was back in the time where, I always saw Dr. Turnbull as he was among that array of beautiful Black people in that era
Mhm.
who they're kind of unsung. He's
Uh-huh.
along with the Mother Hales of the world, Mother Hale, who
Mhm.
took in crack babies and during that time, because this was we were in the bosom of the crack era. And then you
Mhm.
had the Song of Hope, and this man is countering that with music, showing the world that
Right.
no, Black boys aren't monsters.
Yeah.
They're not criminals. And not only are they just as good, they're actually better.
Uh-huh.
Like he was not shy about it. He said, "Yo, it was like Vienna Boys Choir." He said, "It's not
Right.
even a
Mhm.
competition." He said, "Because we
Right.
can do what they do easy, but they
Right.
can't. Can they do Earth, Wind, and Fire? Can they do Nat King Cole? Can they do Ellington?" He said they
Mhm.
can't switch off on styles, and he was right. And the beauty of how he taught us gave us a real sense of pride in
Yeah.
ourselves as full human beings,
Ooh.
and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
I would always go into the building, and they would have um, posters of great African kings and queens
Mhm.
and Black American personalities throughout for our own subconscious mind. We had
Right.
teachers who looked like us, who drilled us as if they had a stake in us. And
Mhm.
I tell people all the time that I was so scholastically gifted during
Yeah.
my middle school years because
Uh-huh.
like all my teachers literally were me. They were Black men who were
Yeah.
brilliant and who didn't I couldn't get away with anything. But
Uh-huh.
it was like they did it with a twinkle in their eye. It was like, I'm not going to let you play that mediocre thing. I think it was the
Mhm.
greatest gift for me. They were like, the burden of our history.
Mhm.
They were constantly throwing that at us. Like, you
Yeah.
don't have a right not to be. You don't have a right not
Yeah.
to succeed. Like, and don't think too highly of yourself,
Yeah.
because believe me, there are people who didn't have that shot who probably blow you out the water, and they were right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then there's also the joy of that brotherly camaraderie of
Yeah.
being around. Like, I was around my favorite singers, honestly, are people you never know They were never, they weren't famous. The greatest singers I ever knew were in that boy choir. I mean,
Right.
I got a brother who he's passed now. Terrence Wright was his name.
Okay.
Terrence Wright sang the greatest rendition of Amazing Grace I've ever heard in my life. I would put his rendition up against Aretha Franklin. God, she is the queen, but I'd put his rendition up against anybody's. There was never a time he sang that in our show where the audience wasn't floored. And it came from like his, I mean, it was just, I mean, when your peers are like, damn.
Like,
your brother's like, oh man. You know, like, and he was one of the people, he introduced me to Donny Hathaway and the late great Daryl Coley. And he was the one, like, I remember my voice kind of was like, we would do it at a concert. And by then I was like one of the principal members because I do a lot of solos, and for some, my voice was just gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. I was just, and he literally walked me through how to get through it mentally. And he taught me how to dig into a place where he said, he said, it's not about, he said, don't worry about your instrument. He taught me how to really sing from my depths at a really young age. And I remember doing a concert and I applied what he said. And no, the voice wasn't, but I did it. And I was like, wow. I mean, that's what I was around. I was around people like that, very gifted young men who sharpened each other, you know. And we fought like any brothers. You know, it was like this beautiful camaraderie. You hate each other, you love each other. You know, you'll fight for each other. You know, you pick on each other, but nobody comes in the family picks on you. You know, I mean, it was like that. So I had that. I'm always grateful to my brothers in song for that, because that really gave me, it filled a real wonderful space for me where I didn't always have the consistent presence, you know, all the time, but that filled that wonderful space for me. And in a way I was really privileged to have that, because it's just see all of these wonderful colors of manhood and to see it as you look. You know, because it really aids you going out into the world that is always lying to you. Like, media and social media is so dangerous for the Black mind.
Yes, it is.
It's like, my mother was a genius, man. I used to think she was so crazy, but she was a genius because she just would. I didn't watch TV really until like the Cosby Show came on.
Oh, okay.
You know, because my mother, she's like, there's nothing there for you. She would make me watch the news and decipher everything. She taught me how to read media.
Okay.
She taught me how to read media. She taught me, she said, it's the stuff they don't say. And she taught me to notice how they're portraying you. Notice how they portray you when you commit a crime, and how detailed and how vile you look in the mugshot and whatever. And notice how the others don't. She like, I mean, the things she would break. Her main thing was like, she gave me a sense of identity and taught me how to think. And she wasn't one of these mothers who insisted on trying to make me a man. I remember she grabbed me up one time because, you know, I was thinking I was complimenting her, talking about she's been a mother and a father. She's like, I'm not your daddy. She's like, I don't have the equipment. She said, and she said, no, I don't. She said, now that relationship between me and him, that's us. But I don't have the equipment. She said, I'm not your daddy. I was like, wow. And that stuck with me as I got older as a man. Like, I mean, I really had that wonderful privilege of somebody who was invested in really pouring into me a sense of self and reality that has held me in good stead even till this day.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And so I think I'm safe to assume that you brought all of everything you learned from your mother, from the choir, from teachers who were like invested you from the beginning into being a ringmaster, into that beautiful detour, as you call it, of like, okay, this is now my life. And so my question to you would be, were there any like, I guess, either lessons or even like limiting beliefs that you had as a ringmaster? Because I know it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this now. But then it lasted, and it was a detour. But did you ever go, ooh, wait, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is there ever a moment of like, maybe I should go back into opera?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I was plagued with the ignorance most people have of circus world. I didn't realize how intricate and integral circus is to entertainment and society. In society, especially. I mean, circus was one of the first industries that welcomed ex-slaves.
Yeah.
And treated them like equals. It was one of the first industries where women literally could run things and it was fine. Like before, it's great. There's a documentary on it too. They were talking about how, back in the day, of course, it was a very, very conservative Puritan look, but that wasn't there on the circus. I mean, you had these women in tights and they were showing because it went with their work. And in circus culture, it was really nothing for us to be working alongside each other in that respect.
Yeah.
Because the real aim was the show. So I was ignorant to a lot of things, and so it caused me not to always appreciate what this gift I had. Here I was in a full house in Madison Square Garden. Which itself is extraordinary. It's freaking Madison Square Garden, man. I saw Michael Jackson there. I saw Andre the Giant there when I was a kid. And here I am, a native New Yorker in Madison Square Garden, and I could appreciate it. But I still had this kind of, should I be going over to the Met or whatever? Not knowing that the Met was actually once upon a time called, oh my goodness, what is the singer's name that Barnum discovered? Goodness, people are gonna kill me when they hear this. But anyway, good Lord, because it was right on to. But she was this famous. The Met was actually named after her. It used to be called the theater after her. So still, there was a circus connection.
Okay,
and I just had this. I think it was this morbid, this strange thinking of legitimacy.
Yes.
And not realizing that, I mean, first and foremost, and I want every actor, performer anywhere to understand this. A successful artist is a working artist.
Say that again for the people in the back. Say it again.
Is a working artist. I was suffering kind of from a spirit of covetousness. And it was kind of a lie, I mean, I'm up here thinking, oh, I'm not really legitimate if I'm not on Broadway or if I'm not at the Metropolitan Opera, which is crap. Here it is. I'm with I was with a renowned American institution, an American treasure. I'm going all over the country like I always wanted to do. I always wanted to travel. I am the principal voice and face of that. The first ever of that, and many, many scores of people I get to perform in front of. Then really, honestly, than most opera singers would. And, if you look at it, because you can't be singing opera like that 10 times a week. You die, But, I could do the circus shows, which weren't easy. They weren't like, I mean, when they say they play to your strengths, they do. They made songs specifically for me in my range, and I had to not only do that, but I had to do all this announcing, and I was the ambassador. So I did the multitude of the majority of interviews, which I enjoyed all of it. And I realized during the process, man, this is me. Like, this is where I fit. This works all of these different parts of me that I really just enjoy using. And the more I appreciated it, I got to see how much, the privilege I had in Ringling Brothers and really in the circus now is I get to be a part of the creative process. I really get to be a part of the creative process. Like, I mean, I am deferred to even more so now that I'm older and I've been well established. It's funny to me because I'm still like kid, And the boys, because, I'll have circus owners asking me, no, but really, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? I'm going, I
Yeah.
don't own this thing,
You're
but
like, I don't know.
yeah, but I appreciate it because I
Yeah.
get that's circus culture. It's not, we're not heavy into this. Look, if it's an idea that works
Mm-hmm.
for the betterment of the show, we're going to use it. I don't care who thinks it up.
Right.
And, to have that kind of respect for what it is I've contributed is a really wonderful thing, to be around these different types of people.
Yeah.
In different cultures, and to see how they receive you.
Yeah.
Because of course, look, I'm very race conscious. You cannot not be growing up in New York City, growing up in America. And so I was very aware, and it was strange. I have to say, it was funny. For the most part, I've been treated like pre-murder trial OJ. Like you.
Yeah.
You remember how white people just loved OJ before the trial? Like, I mean, for the most part, yeah, I was like, man. And it's interesting, your own curiosities of people.
Yeah.
And how you run into these interesting commonalities. One of my best friends when I joined the circus was this diminutive Russian acrobat. Her name was Anna. And when we first met, she didn't speak any English. Obviously, I didn't speak any. She didn't speak English. I obviously didn't speak Russian.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how people can communicate when they really want to. Body language. Especially, one thing I found out about people, when they're in love, they'll communicate. When they're trying to get with each other, they'll communicate. When they're really want to do business, they'll communicate. You communicate through life. You communicate through so many things. And as we got to know each other and our communication skills became better, we found out how much we had in common. Because she would come up to me about my voice all the time. Oh, Johnathan, your voice is mine is so good. And I'm like, Anna, you can fly. Like, and she's like, yeah, no, but I mean, how do you do that? And I'm like, you can fly. And so we started telling each other our war stories. And come to find out, her gymnastics instructors over in Russia were her Dr. Turnbull.
Okay.
It mirrored. Like, she told me things they would say, do, and how they would treat her. I said, I basically said, I had mean teachers. She said, me too. We went through it, and she's like, but it's like I said, it's so crazy because now we're adults. I said, isn't it amazing? We see what they were doing. She said, yeah, my teacher, she wouldn't let me get away with any. She said, you're so good, Anna, and I'm not letting you just be. And she would come get me. She would be on me. Yeah. I was like, man, I had the same thing. And seeing how we've progressed. Yeah. Excellence, the pursuit of excellence really has no cultural setting. It's transcendent. And it has certain rules, consistency, habits. And that's what these teachers were teaching us. Just really committing to something and committing to it correctly and really honoring it and loving it. I mean, the first time I really saw men cry were these musicians crying while they were conducting us. To see Black men crying while they're conducting us with music. Yeah. You know what it does to kids? We would see Dr. Turnbull just well up and overjoyed. It does something to your understanding of who you are. It just makes the lies that you're told about yourself just die even a greater death, because I'm like, man, you see this full humanity. Like, he loved music, and the teachers he brought in, who were all world class, they loved music, and they poured it over us. And I said, man, that's the thing, and that's sort of the attitude I've tried to take with me into this world of the circus, which I found is very much welcome, because the artists here, many of them had to do all sorts of pivots. I mean, you hear some of their stories. It's really extraordinary how their families came to be and the multiple generations. And
Uh-huh.
maybe there was an injury here and they had to relearn new acts here and retool their body another way. I mean, they're extraordinary stories, but these are people who are so deeply committed
Mm-hmm.
to their
Mm-hmm.
craft,
Right.
and they have to be because some of them, they don't have the luxury of airing. I can miss a note, I can crack, I can miss a line. I'll live.
Right.
But you're on a high wire. You bet you're on a
You can't
flying
misstep.
right. You're on a
Yeah.
flying trapeze, or if you're in a cage, even if those lines are well kept, and I've talked to the best trainers in the world. I've been with them. I've watched them,
Yeah.
and that art is in itself. You have to love doing that. Like
Yeah.
you have to really love doing that because you have to be consistent. I knew guys, they'd be out all night doing their thing, but precisely at whatever time in the morning they're supposed to be there, it didn't
Uh-huh.
matter if they went to sleep the minute before, they were
Right.
there. They had
Right.
to be consistent, and that's how their life is, and that's how they approach their work. And I see people like that all the time when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to their particular skill set.
Yeah.
Just real, uncompromising commitment to it.
Yeah.
And that's something I've adopted. I'm like, wow, it's just this unrelenting. Hey, this is what I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm that in all ways. They don't eat a certain way. They don't do certain things. They're always chomping at the bit. No matter what life is doing,
Uh-huh.
they're going to be there doing their thing.
Right.
And to me, that is so inspiring. And I think it for me, it was a great life lesson for really anything you want to pursue. I don't care what it is, whether you're a
Mm-hmm.
writer, dancer, actor, singer, whatever.
Yeah.
I think approach it. There has to be a sort of a sense of obsession with
Yeah. Oh,
what it
it
is you do.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think obsession and success, they're cousins. So I
Mm-hmm.
think,
I love that.
yeah, yeah, I learned that with these wonderful artists here, and it's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's very humbling because you grow up and the connotation about circus is not good,
Mm-hmm.
but then you really get immersed in it, and it's so I always loved inviting my theater friends and opera friends to a circus because it was like a religious experience for them.
Yeah.
It's like because they're like, oh my, like I didn't
Yeah.
know, like I didn't realize the human body could do that, and you
Right.
do it how many times a day, like it's wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and to see
Mm-hmm.
artists, give them that kind of respect it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.